ask the Lord to open your eyes, because godly relationships and godly friendships are all around us. And we just have to be intentional with saying, Lord, let me see what you want me to see, and let me be in our devotion to him. Lord, let me be that friend to the people around me, so that then I can in turn receive what you have for me.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Journey Podcast. We're so glad that you're able to join us. We have a special guest, my best friend, Tobi Morakinyo. What's up, my man?
What's up? How you doing? I'm excited to be here.
Man, it's going to be so good. It's going to be so good. And I'm excited to talk about what we're talking about today. We're talking about godly friendships. Yes, and I knew I had to bring you on for this. So, man, thank you for being with us here.
No, thank you for having me. Again, I'm like super excited for what you're doing here. And what we get to talk about today, like having godly friendships, I see that so much in our relationship. And it's cool because people struggle a lot of times to figure out if a relationship is godly. And so for anybody joining us, I'm excited just to talk to you for a few moments. We're excited to just, go tit for tat on it and just talk about, godly relationships. And in general, like, what you're doing here in the Journey Podcast, I love it because everybody has a different journey. Yeah. And everybody has a unique perspective in the journey that they're walking on. Yeah. And so what's cool is that you get to highlight everybody's unique perspective in what the Lord is doing in and through their lives, and how does that reflect and how does that help people who are watching this podcast, who get to consume this content, because it's not just for you to take somebody's story, but it's also how can you apply different things from their story in your life. I'm rambling before we go on the topic, but like that's how I approach the Bible. Yeah, those different journeys that different characters in the Bible took, how can I apply that to my life? Where is Jesus in that story, and how does that apply to me? That's what you're doing with this podcast. You're taking different journeys and now saying, where's the Jesus in that? And how can that be applied to those around us? So good. And
the power of friendship is, and I love that you're here, because now I can say half of this equipment that I'm using here today is Tobi's. So, I got to give you props for that, because, the Journey Podcast would not be the Journey Podcast without some of your equipment and my equipment. So there's the power in friendship right there. So
the power of two people who are, hold on, this is like making something funny serious, but the power of two people having a vision for something in their lives, because I'm not trying to do a podcast. Like, I'm not trying to do any of that, but I am passionate about photography.
Yes, that's
true.
So
it's cool how it just, like these destinies are like kind of coinciding.
It's so true.
That you can be able to use what I have. Also, this microphone, like I bought this so I could do covers and do music. And now it's just awesome how it's blessing what you're doing in the podcast, because now you're able to use it to amplify your voices and the voices that are on this platform.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for letting me use your stuff.
Anytime. Seriously.
Well, I think the first thing I want to ask you is, what do you think a godly relationship is really? And, and how do we look at a godly relationship, and what is that?
Sure. When I think of a godly relationship, the first thing that I do for me is look at the individual and then look at the relationship as a whole. Godly relationships have God at the center. So how, as an individual, and this is just me reflecting in my relationships and how I view godly relationships between me and somebody else, how is my devotion to the Lord? Yeah. And then am I in sync with that relationship that I'm trying to form with what they're called to do as well? So when my relationship with the Lord is aligned, I'm able to be a godly friend to those around me. That's good. So then godly relationships in turn are people calling that out in one another. Yeah. I do think godly relationships, it's not necessarily all the time 50-50. I do think there are moments where you're pouring into somebody, and it's just as much of a godly relationship if they're in a season where you need to be intentional with pouring out in them. But it's a ebb and flow where there's also this understanding that they're also calling out the God in you and the call in you as well.
Yeah.
So I kind of look at godly relationships in that way.
Yeah.
In that lens, is this person centered on God? If not, what purpose do they serve in my life? Because God can still be in that relationship as well.
And that's so good because, like, for our relationship, for those who don't know, Toby, you are what, 7 years older than me?
I am 28.
You're 28.
And you turned
23. So
5 years.
5 years. Okay. 5 years. But that's a big difference when we really did become close friends.
Yeah.
So
I was graduating college and you were still in
high school.
And I was tutoring you.
That's so true. So the way we became friends was my sophomore year of high school. I went totally virtual. I was doing kind of like a homeschool kind of type of thing. And Toby, you ended up like helping me with my bio homework, which you were doing.
I was a bio major.
You're a bio major, which is crazy because now he's, in ministry.
Yeah.
That's
another podcast.
That's another podcast. But you were helping me with my bio homework, but it ended up just us hanging out every single day. Mm-hmm. I would go with you to FAU.
Yeah.
You would go to class. I would go to the library, and I would do my stuff. You would do your stuff. Yeah. But it ended up being us hanging out all the time. But I think the biggest thing for, both of us that we started to realize was in the midst of us just hanging around each other, probably for you can talk about your perspective in a minute. For you, it's more like, okay, you were a leader of mine. He was the worship leader for the youth group. So I was under him as a student. But in the midst of our relationship, there was always God moments where we're always having God conversations. And there always comes a deep care. I think that's one of the the biggest thing when it comes to godly relationships is, do you care about that person? Yeah. Do you care about their life and what they're going through? And is there a trust there that you can be transparent and vulnerable in those moments? And there was many moments like that we had where, for me, I always grew up hanging out with older people. So it was normal to me, Bradley, we had Bradley Reyes on the podcast. I was hanging out with Bradley a lot during those times and different things like that. So I was always hanging out with older people. My brothers are older and all of those things. So for me, it was kind of like, yes, he's a leader, but I see him as a close friend, where then it kind of built into a very close friendship where I graduated and you're moving forward in life and different things like that, where God really just intertwined our lives to be a part of each other's lives in a very unique way. Yeah. What was your perspective on that?
Just on what you were saying, like, there was a consistency that we had in our relationship. Mm-hmm. I think what's so powerful about what we walked through, we were able to see each other literally like almost every day. Mm-hmm. We were hanging out, we were connecting, and what began to like really transform our relationship was when we would have actual conversations about the friendships and the relationships that we had around us. I think when we're able to like really highlight and elicit like what somebody's current situation is around them, then you really start to evaluate it as a person. Like when you would ask me like, okay, who am I close to? Or when I would ask you that, it would make you think in ways, okay, like who I'm not intentional about this, and then it makes you want to be intentional. Yeah. And so like over the years, as that relationship just remained consistent, it was cool to see the depth of the conversations that we were able to get into. Yeah. And I think what's important about our journey that might help other people is understanding the consistency that comes, or that is almost necessary sometimes when it goes to cultivating a relationship. You've got to be like okay with being around that person. You've got to be okay with the consistency that is needed and the intentionality that is needed to make that relationship grow.
True.
Some friendships can happen out of the like spark of one deep conversation. Yeah. But for us, I feel like because I was your leader for a certain amount of time, like and like we were walking through that season together, I think the consistency of all the conversations that we would have just kind of brought this like closeness.
Yeah.
And then that closeness brought that care. Like I really cared about where you were going in life. I really cared about and care still about like what the Lord is calling you to. And when people try to come against that, I have a history about who you are. And it's like I'm able to not only defend you, but remind you of what God is calling you to do. And that's what we're called to do with godly relationships.
And I think the part of you saying it's so being intentional is so critical.
Yeah.
It's so critical because when those moments do happen, you can either support them, you can either be there for them, however it seems. But I remember there being moments with us two where if we weren't like in deep conversations or we were being more distant with each other, we would be straight up. Like there's so many times where we'd text each other and be like, "Yo, like you've been kind of distant. Everything good?" Like there's been so many of those moments where you're being intentional with who you're getting to know.
Yeah.
And I remember those moments, and those moments define the relationship because people, if you feel that distant from, or you feel like you're getting close to somebody, and then a week or two goes by where you're not in great communication or anything like that, people usually retreat and then isolate themselves from the relationship rather than being, hey, like you said, we have that history. Why can't I just be straight up?
Yeah.
In the moment, you might not like me being straightforward and being transparent, being like, yo, like you're acting out or you're not being who you really are. Like I know you enough to say this straight up.
Yeah.
And you might feel that tension right there in that moment, but it's going to be beneficial for our relationship in the long run.
Right.
And so what would you say, like, for people that are trying to look for these types of relationships? And everybody knows, we always talk about the smaller inner circle and the outer circle and different people that you let in. So how can they, kind of vary who those types of people are?
So for me, I try when it comes to like evaluating like where somebody is, it's all contingent on trust. And so for me, I like to test. It sounds weird, but it's not calculated at all. It's really just, can I trust you with a little bit of who I am? Then like as I feel the access and the openness to that, then there's a draw. Obviously, there are practical things like, is there a chemistry there? Do our personalities mesh? And I don't think that if your personalities don't mesh, that means you can't be friends. I don't think that. I think that there's like ways for us to maneuver through relationships to understand, okay, this person's going to be a part of my inner circle, or this person's going to be a part of my maybe my outer circle, and we respect that. I think for me though, like I always kind of test the fruit of like, okay, can I trust you? Can I bring you in? Are you going to be there for me through different seasons? Then the other side of it is I kind of evaluate, or like through life experience, is this person somebody who loves God? Is this person somebody who is encouraging? Is this person somebody who's not afraid to be to hold me accountable? And is this person not can this person receive I guess what I say without taking offense to it? Because many times how we say something, it might not be how somebody's willing or able to receive it.
Yeah.
And so we've got to, for me, I kind of evaluate that too. Like how do we go through conflict together? How do we go through dry seasons together? How do we go through seasons where a lot is happening? And for me, after being able to like evaluate that, I'm able to get to a place where I can kind of understand, okay, this person, it can be a certain distance from me or can be close to me. And so like it's different for like, there are different factors that play into that.
Yeah.
But that's overall kind of how I like evaluate it for me personally.
That's so good. And I think one of the biggest things when it comes to godly relationships and us understanding who do we let in, I think what you're hitting on is a little bit of the spiritual aspect of it too. And we've talked about this, the relationship between David and Jonathan and their how connected they were spiritually, just like, by God's grace. And it makes me realize, how do I really, God, how do I, that's the question I always have to ask myself, how do I be intentional with my relationships? And then it comes back to God.
Right.
Like, I really do think we need to be praying for our friends. We need to, allow our friends to know that we're there for them. That through every season, that we go through, that we're in your corner, and do you see that person, like you were saying, do they love God? Yeah. Are they living out, are they living out what they believe?
Ooh, let me say something really fast. Cause what you're highlighting on, I don't want it to get past us that we have to be doing that for us. Like I can't hold you to a certain standard that I'm not holding myself to. Like everything that you're saying about prayer, about being there for them. Am I praying? Do I have my devotional with the Lord? Am I interceding for my friend? Am I having that relationship? And I started with this, but it's important because oftentimes we look to what's wrong in the person, and then we don't ever evaluate, how am I feeding the relationship?
That's so good.
And it speaks to kind of the culture that we're in. I've been in this kind of season where I've been saying this a lot. We consume so much that we're always primarily focused on what's being poured into me. What am I receiving from a friendship?
It becomes an I.
Right. And so when I'm evaluating godly relationships, to what you're saying, it's first, how am I being a reflection in that for that person? Because then it's not necessarily what the person is doing, but how am I adding to the relationship? And then if they don't add much to me, that's okay. That defines for me where they stand in my life. But if there's that exchange happening, and both people on the sides of the relationship are self-aware to understand, I need to cultivate my relationship with the Lord and be accountable and be intentional with that closeness that I need to have with my friend. I think that's where relationships really flourish.
I think where you're getting at is, when it comes to godly friendships and godly relationships, it's more than, can we have fun together?
Yeah. Ooh, say that again, bro.
Like, it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's more like, yes, it's a huge part of it, because you love being with your friends, but it's more than, can we just have fun? Hey, like, it's more than that. I think it really touched out, and I think that's where, for our relationship, that's where it hit, that's where it started. It started with having godly conversations. That the conversation that we're having, it is impacting me to realign my focus on who He is.
That's true.
And so, and that's where these friendships and godly friendships are so key, is because we were talking about it. The spiritual aspect to it is, it's more than just, can we get along? Yes, okay, we can get along, but are we leading each other? Are we there for each other? Are we pointing each other back to Christ?
Yeah. What I think of is, deep calls out to deep. I think of that phrase right there. Like, I'm naturally a deep person, so I tend to go past the fun in moments.
I think that's where we kind of, because I'm totally fun country. Like, let's go out, let's do some fun things.
How's your soul? Like, what is going on with you right now? Because I just, for me, I don't.
You're always how are you really?
Yeah. I ask you one time, and then if I have time, because hold on, sometimes we don't have time to ask it again. We ask that one time, and we ask in passing. But for me, I struggle with that, because I want to get to the depth of it. Like, okay, am I if I'm asking you, how are you? I don't need to just know good. Like, I need to know, or I would like to know, if you give me that access, like, what's really going on with you, because everybody's on a different journey, and everybody's at a different place when you ask them how they're doing. And so I think it's super important that we call out the deep in the other person.
That's so good.
Not just like having fun moments, which is important and which is great. But I'm just reminded of a scripture in Proverbs 13 verse 20, like, he who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed. How in your relationships are you calling out the wisdom? How are you pouring out the wisdom in those relationships? Because as you do that, you'll find the fruit of that relationship is not just going to be fun, fleeting moments, but it's fruitful moments that you carry with you throughout life.
Yeah. And I think some of the practical ways of where we can start being more aware of our friendships around us is starting off there. If you ask somebody, hey, how are you? And they start to slowly let you in, see where those godly conversations go.
Yeah.
Because when you begin to become aware of those godly conversations, then you begin to see, okay, this person is intentional with allowing me in. Like, they're, and that might take a few times of hanging out and getting to know each other. Like, obviously that takes time, it takes time to have that chemistry and stuff like that. But you got to test the fruit in that. Yeah. Like, where are they? Do they feel like they're comfortable enough to share this with you? Do they feel like they're comfortable enough to bring you in? Because the truth is, and the reality is, you can't force somebody to be a friend like that. You can't. And not and it's okay. Not everyone's going to be that friend. You're going to have those people that are in the outer circle where you're cordial with, and they're acquaintances, and they're great people. You love them in your life. And then you're going to have that inner circle. You're going to have those close 3 or 4 or 5 that you really, really trust, where it's like, hey, I know what I'm sharing with you. Like, you're going to keep it safe.
When in the thick of it, those are the people that you can call on, that will pray with you, that'll just, even if they just need to just be around, they'll just be there. You've done that so many times for me in our relationship, where it's like, okay, I just need somebody. I'm struggling in my mind. Yeah. And I just need somebody to just be around me. And so I think it's important that you evaluate that, and then just make sure that you do the same for the other person. Yeah,
that's so good. Well, Tob, thank you so much, man, for just being a part of this conversation. I think this is going to be very helpful for some people, and I think, this relationship, I'm so thankful for our relationship and God bringing you into my life, because it's going to really help me in the future. It's going to help me, it helps me today, and things that I go through. And I'm just so grateful that God brought you into my relationship. And I'm praying that the people that are listening to this will start to seek after the Lord and start to really ask, like, Lord, bring that type of person into my life. Bring that type of friend that will give me wisdom, that will give me strength, that will be in my corner no matter what. The truth is that God doesn't want you to do this journey alone.
Right.
He doesn't want you to do this journey alone. And if you feel like you're doing it alone, reach out, start talking to people, start, praying to God, asking him, Lord, start to bring those people into my life.
Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah.
If I could say something really fast on that, like, along with asking or being that person, ask the Lord to open your eyes, because sometimes you don't even realize that the person that you're agitated by is called to be somebody who is a partner in your season of life that you're walking through. Ask the Lord to open your eyes, because godly relationships and godly friendships are all around us. And we just have to be intentional with saying, Lord, let me see what you want me to see, and let me be in our devotion to him. Lord, let me be that friend to the people around me, so that then I can in turn receive what you have for me.
That is so good. That's so good. Well, Toby, thank you so much, man, for being on the Journey podcast. It was a great pleasure. Hey, if you really think this is going to be beneficial for somebody, go ahead and share it with someone else. Go ahead, like and subscribe to our channel. If you're whatever platform you're listening to this on, go ahead and do that. But we're so grateful that you have joined the Journey podcast, and I hope this was enriching for you. But we will see you next week. We got another special guest. So God bless you guys.